Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Welcome to Brivia's webinar, a monthly webinar, Accountability Shouldn't Be Hurt. My name is Chris Downey, and on behalf of all of us at Brivia Consulting, I'd like to welcome you to yet another webinar. I see in our participant listing, we have a lot of familiar names, so thank you for those that have joined us before, and I also see some new names, so thank you for joining us today. I'm going to introduce our speaker, Steve de Groot, in just a minute or so here, but I want to just set the stage a little bit and let you know we are here for 45 minutes today. We will have lots of time for Q&A at the end. Steve always reserves some time at the end to be able to answer as many questions as he can. But as always with the Brivia webinars, we want to make this as interactive as possible. So let's use the technology that's available to us. Encourage you to use the chat throughout the presentation, and don't wait to ask your questions until the end. Put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A function, and we'll answer them as we can get through this. In fact, I'm going to encourage you to use the chat now and let us know where you're joining us from. Where are you in the world? I am in Winnipeg, in my office in Winnipeg. I'm excited to be here with you all. But let us know where you're joining from. We usually are covered from coast to coast, and we'd love to hear from you all. So also know that our session is being recorded today, as we always do, and we'll make that recording available to you in the coming days. So you don't need to scramble to take notes. You'll have a recording available for you to listen to again. And in fact, we're going to encourage you to to share this recording with as many people as you think could benefit from it. I'll circle back with you at the end of the webinar to let you know how you can stay in touch with us and what to expect next. But for now, let me introduce to you a good friend of mine and business colleague, Steve de Groot. Now, Steve has committed his life to helping others, and he has done this in many capacities, both personally and professionally. He's done so as a therapist, as an associate professor of human behavior, as the founder of the Getting to Better initiative, and of course, now as our president at Brivia Consulting. Steve is also an author of a sage publication, a book called Responsive Leadership, which is used in universities and colleges around the world. And Steve is actually in the process of writing his next book, which is titled Getting to Better. And it's a new model for elevating human potential at work and in life. And stay tuned for that. We're hoping it to be out and available to you in the fall of 2023. So more information on that to come. But for now, let me pass it over to Steve. Steve?
Hey, Chris. Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm always excited to be able to collaborate with great people doing great things around the world. And I see from the chat, we have people all over Canada, from the US, different parts of the world. That's awesome. Thanks for being here today. There's lots going on. So here we are. We are talking about accountability. I'm sure you've heard this word before, right? What was your experience when you heard that word, when you're being held accountable? So what we're going to do today is, if you've been here before, thanks for being back. I love letting you start with your experience, right? There's lots of research out there on stuff, but your experience is the most accurate research we can tune into. So I want to ask you to think about, have you ever, and I want to see this in the chat, right? Great use of the chat already. Have you ever been in a situation or been part of one? Maybe you witnessed a situation where someone was using the word accountable or accountability, and it didn't feel like a really good experience. So I want to see that in the chat. Have you ever been in an experience where you've heard the word accountability, but the experience wasn't that great? Okay, so I'm also going to take that reflection a little bit further, and we're going to get into some positive stuff. Have you ever been held accountable yourself for a process or a specific outcome that left you feeling less than good? Right? Have you ever had that experience? I'd love to see that in the chat. Right? Did the experience make you feel not only uncomfortable, did it make you feel dazed or nauseous or confused? Right? I see people in the chat saying they've had that experience. What was that like? Right? What was that like? I'm reading the responses, and it seems like most people can relate to this. One of the things that I do quite often is talk to a lot of people during the week. And over the last year, I've asked hundreds of people this very same question. Right. And all of the responses are consistent, like in the chat, and they're also very concerning. Right. So what is it about this experience, accountability? Well, let's talk about that. One of the first things we can do is just let's start with the definition, right? The feeling or the experience should line up with the definition. Accountability, what is it? Let's just Merriam-Webster dictionary, right? The quality or state of being accountable, especially an obligation or a willingness. So it's willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's own actions. If that doesn't sound like a bad thing, that sounds amazing, actually. It sounds like a great thing. Could you imagine if all leaders demonstrated like an obligation, their obligation to take responsibility? Imagine if everyone within a group, within a team, and a whole organization had the willingness to take responsibility for their actions or inactions. Imagine what that would look like. Imagine what that would feel like. Unfortunately, for many of us, this is the dilemma or the paradox. Many of us, when we hear the word accountability, it's often when something has gone wrong, right? When something or somebody has screwed up, or we need someone or something to blame, right? That's honestly, that's what most of our experience has been. It's why when most of us think of the word accountability, we shudder. What comes to mind for most of us is an experience of witnessing or being held accountable. And I'm going to put that in quotes because what we're talking about right now isn't, according to Brivia and our team, is not accountability. It's something else, right? Often when we have that negative experience, it feels more like we're being scapegoated. We're being set up. We're being hung out to dry. We've heard these expressions, or maybe thrown under the bus, right? These are often the expressions that are used with the word accountability. And I've said for decades that values are just words until our actions give them meaning, right? And unfortunately, the general meaning and the collective experience that we've created for this beautiful word accountability, right, is not positive. So today there's good news, right? So what's the great news? We're gonna talk about why is this a problem, right? And what can we as a collective, individual leaders do about it? Right, in this time together, we're going to simplify this idea of accountability and provide practical and actionable strategies that we love to do at Brivia, right? To put accountability into practice and elevate the experience so that it can be positive, affirming, and meaningful. The good news is that we have the capacity to change this, and I'm glad you're here. I'm glad if you're an aspiring leader or a community member, I'm glad that you're here because we can change this and we can like improve the experience of accountability so that people celebrate it, they uphold it, right? So that we run to it instead of run away from it. The word accountability, one of the things I often say is that it should be something that makes us shine. Accountability shouldn't be something that makes us shrink, right? Shouldn't make us shrink, shouldn't make us shiver. So I want to be clear here today. We're talking about accountability. We're talking about leader accountability first and foremost. We will talk about personal accountability and personal responsibility and the importance of those intentions, right? We're going to get to that in just a minute. Accountability, let's talk about how did a really good thing go so wrong, right? And I have to admit, and after having so many conversations with people, when we talk about such a negative experience of accountability, right, we have to admit that we've created this experience, right? This word and this experience, and we talk a lot about the intent impact gap, right? Right. The gap that exists between our intentions, what we want to do, so accountability, the great thing of accountability, and the experience that we or other people are having, right? And currently we're seeing that there is a massive gap between the concept of accountability and the experience that we're trying to have. One of the major reasons for this, and this is where we're going to start at Brivia, we agree, our whole team agrees that accountability unintentionally and unfortunately has been confused with the word punishment. Right? When you think about it for a second, you look at any definition of punishment. It's often about a variety of things: to harshly impose, right? To inflict discomfort, to bring about harm. That's what punishment is. That is not an open willingness to take responsibility or to hold yourself accountable. Right? So if you think about your experience over the years, we've heard things. Just last week, I heard someone say, oh yeah, we should feed it to them. What? Feed what? To who? Right? We hear things like, oh yeah, she's gonna get it, right? Oh, someone's in trouble, right? When something's gone off track or when something hasn't worked out in the way that we wanted it to work out, right? This is what's interesting to us at Brivia, and our experience has been that unfortunately, accountability has been confused with punishment. And we want to be really clear that accountability shouldn't hurt. Now, let's be really clear as well. Hey, we all have high expectations. Does accountability sting? Does accountability feel disappointing? Absolutely. Does it hurt when we few of us are okay with not meeting expectations. Few of us are okay with not getting a process right or meeting a set of objectives that we all agreed were important, right? So it's important that accountability can be uncomfortable, but accountability is not about discomfort. It's not about harm, should not be imposed on people by other people. So why is it important to get it right? We all know this, and we're going to get to some really simple strategies. Accountability is a necessary mechanism for success, for support, for people feeling that they've got what they need, a clarity around doing what they need. Accountability is one of the greatest mechanisms for success. When done well, right, it enhances great things. Integrity, it builds confidence, it strengthens trust, it leads to all sorts of great things like high-performing individuals. Individual teams, organizations, right? When accountability is not done well, right? Right? We all have had that experience. It's unfortunate. I don't think I saw a no in the chat of the almost 100 people here, right? Most of us have had that negative experience. And when it's not done well, when accountability isn't done well, you only have to go back to your experience, right? At the beginning of this webinar to connect with what it's like to feel like something's being harshly imposed or intended to bring about discomfort or harm. The experience is negative, but so are the consequences. What are the consequences? Well, we can start with two of the biggest things, a lack of trust and a lack of safety. It can lead to experiences that range from disappointment to discontentment, disillusionment, demoralization, and even it can be destructive. Right? Now, some people might be thinking right now, Steve, aren't you getting a little bit dramatic, right? And I see in the chat, right? Accountability should not equal blame. Absolutely. We're also seeing some other things in the chat. It also should be seen as a challenge. It can be seen as many things, right? But not something that's harshly imposed that creates discomfort or demoralization. Now, some people might be going, "Oh, well, you're getting really dramatic here, Steve, right? Aren't you taking this a little bit too far around saying that it can actually be demoralizing?" As a matter of fact, it is important to take it as serious as we are, because in our webinar on moral injury, which is available on our website, we make a direct link between value incongruences, right, which accountability and experience are, and low morale, disengagement, moral distress, and even moral injury. And my work on the core algorithm, let's get in, we're going to move into what we can do about this. And as Chris mentioned, I've been working on this for years. It's a comprehensive model of human potential and performance. And one of the things that, my work has made very clear is that out of all of the things that human beings need most, out of all the different ingredients, two of them are clarity and connection. Okay. So I'm dropping this important point here is to let you know why so many of the strategies and the tools that we use at Privia, including the ones I'm going to introduce today, can have a positive and profound effect and a great impact, a preferred impact when we apply them in the way that we're talking about. So clarity, what are we talking about when I talk about clarity? Clarity for today's discussion is gonna mean clear expectations, clear purpose, right? Being clear on the direction and the outcomes and the roles and the expectations of the task or the objective. That's clarity. It's also about predictability and anticipation. No surprises, right? If something goes right or wrong, we know what to expect. So that's clarity. That's one of the ingredients that we need here. Connection for today will refer to the value or meaning something holds for us. Right? Are we connected to this task? Right? Is the specific task overall or the objectives, are they significant? Is it important to us or for us as a team? Connection also has to do, and I think this is really, really important, is that connection has to do with trust as well. Trust in the person and trust in the process. Okay. So I wanted to definitely, we're covering a lot of ground here, and I want to encourage people to hold on to their questions, because as Chris said, we're going to be answering questions, right? Which is one of my favorite things to do. Okay. So how do we ensure that people are willing to be accountable? Leaders can do this when they create, right? This is where we come back to leaders. When leaders create the conditions where people feel safe and they feel confident to accept responsibility. See, to be willing. When we go back to the definition of accountability, willingness it comes from within, right? So how do we do this? Let's get to the practical, right? How do we fix the paradox that is the experience of accountability, right? And minimize, and if not eliminate, some of the negative consequences that have come with those experiences. So let's get to the very first strategy. I call it the why equation. Well, we call it the why equation. Right? The why equation, now, for those of you who are expecting math and are anxious, don't worry, it's not real math. For those of you who are expecting math, it's not real math. So I wanna manage your expectations. But what is the why equation? Well, it's the two variables. So the equation has two parts. I'm going to talk about this right away, that are required to solve the question of why when it's asked. Right? One of the most important questions, right? Why? Why should I do this? Why should I bother with these steps? Why should I put this set of timelines first? Why should I get this done? Right? This is important. This is important before the task, during the task, and more importantly, after the task. Right? This question was always important. It was always common. But since the pandemic, all of us are asking, why? Why bother? Right? Why should I bother, or why should I do this? Carries a much bigger and a different weight since the pandemic. Right? In our two webinars, again, that are online on our website, Is Your Company Compass Broken? And From Resignation to Resuscitation, we talked a lot about how people are searching for more meaning nowadays. We want more meaning. We want more meaning at work, and we want more meaning in our life. So the answers to the why question, when people ask us why, if that answer has more detail, more clarity, if that answer has more connection, right, it has meaning and it has value, it's going to carry a potency to ensure that it's going to be done to the extent possible in a way that we're hoping for. So let's get to the why equation. It's the first part. So there's two parts, remember? The first part of the why equation is, I call it, what's the point, right? As simple as possible. Why are we doing what we're doing? What's the point of this, right? The answers to this question must be tied to the purpose of the objective. It must be tied to the roles, responsibilities, purpose critical, all of that hard stuff, right? Roles, responsibilities, and expectations. That's half the equation, right? We've got to give in our answer, our answer has to hold clarity around these things. When somebody says, why is this important? I shouldn't just be pulling it out of my hat or somewhere else, right? I should be leaning on the mission, the objectives, the roles, the responsibilities to shape my answer. That's half the equation. What's the other half of the equation? The second part of the why equation is, why do we have to do it in this way? What is the meaning or the value in this? Why are you asking me to do it? The answer somehow must be tied to the vision, maybe, or the values. Right? Am I, or are we expected to do it in a way that is, insert any value, excellence, quality, patients first, integrity, efficiency, right? Whatever values are guiding your organization, there should be somehow, to give it more potency, to give it more meaning, to elevate trust. This is the connection part of the equation. So this is what's really interesting. I love this analogy. If you've ever gone skiing or snowboarding, right? Think about the why equation, that we need clarity to do well, and we need connection to do well. If we have both of those, we're going to do well. Well, imagine that the bindings are your clarity and your connection. Each foot must be secured, right? Each foot must be secured. Every day we're sending people out or down the hill, right? And we need, out in the world, we send them out down that hill we've got to give them a good footing. The right foot, clarity, the left foot, connection. Imagine being sent with only one of the bindings. Imagine being sent down the hill. How challenging would that be? What if the one binding you do have isn't as tight as it could be? What about, and this kind of hurts my heart, because I think at the beginning of the reflection, we all know what it's like to be sent out with one binding or maybe no binding. Why do I like this analogy? I mean, it's hard, but when we send people down the hill with only one binding or no bindings, they flail, they struggle. right? Not only are they at risk of getting hurt, but while you're flailing on the way down, you hit other people. You become a danger to other people in that area, in that space. And I think unintentionally, right? And unfortunately, people are sent out with only one binding on, or two very loose bindings, or none at all. Imagine getting to the bottom of the hill, right? This gets better. I'm just trying to not to be emotional, because I think about even in my career, all the times I thought I was holding people accountable, but I wasn't. I sent them down the hill with one or no bindings. And yeah, I'll admit that sometimes I got to the bottom of the hill and I said, "What's wrong with you? You know better. You should have done better." And some of us, right, don't have to imagine, because we have been there, right? It's up to us, right? It's up to us. Absolutely. It's up to the leader to equip employees and teams with the best possible chance to take the challenges, to go down, to head down that hill, follow that course, including the unexpected and expected obstacles. But most importantly, their bindings of clarity and connection must be as tight as possible. Now, some of you might be going, "Yes, Steve, you mentioned the leader, what about personal responsibility? What about personal accountability?" Absolutely, I agree 100%. We must hold each other accountable. The leader has a major impact on the environment, right? Whether it's intentional or not. And this is really, really important. Some of our webinars, we talk about that gap between the intention and the impact, right? Accountability, as we've discussed, is a very important value, and it leads to value and congruence. And when we compromise clarity and connection, right? If we compromise that almost immediately, unless it's cleared up right away, it creates uncertainty. It creates confusion, a lack of trust, which leads to disillusionment, all that other stuff. Now, personal accountability is difficult in an environment where there's a lack of leadership accountability, where lack of leadership accountability is permitted, or worse yet, it's reinforced. Right? The things that are so important for our success, risks, mistakes, lessons, learning, all that stuff, risks are difficult to take when we're afraid to take them. Mistakes are difficult to acknowledge when we're scared or uncertain about the consequences. Feed it to them, right? Lessons are difficult to learn when the environment is inconsistent, or when we're experiencing incongruencies. See, even in a safe environment, right? Even in a safe, significant, situated environment that we talk about, we can't be responsible for something we're not aware of. I've been saying this for so many years, right? How can we be responsible for something we're not aware of? And I hear people say, "Well, they should know, she should know, they should know better." How? If Chris knows the what and the why, and is feeling clear and is connected, he knows clearly his role for being at a meeting that's important, with the right feedback, support, and encouragement, right? He will be more willing and open to be responsible for when he's getting it right, and more importantly, when he's not. Because we created that openness. So let's get to the 5 strategies that I promised, and then get to questions. Okay. The first thing that I'm going to suggest is that we admit and embrace this reality. I think Chris knows, we've asked, it's got to be over 1,000 people in the last 4 years. Have you ever been held accountable and it hurt? And it's 100%. Somebody has either witnessed it or experienced it. We just have to admit, hey, if we can't be honest about this thing that needs to change, it will never change, right? So it's time that we do something about it. And it's not as hard as it is, as people think it is, right? Let's acknowledge, let's make it a little bit easier. Let's take the sting out, acknowledge that it's not your fault. What we're seeing is this is important if we're going to be open to changing, right? Because also, we got to get out the blame and the shame, right? And the gaming that happens. Right? We've come to understand, and as a recovering academic, I was part of it, we didn't really teach people how to put values into practice, right? That's why this big gap exists. We talk about which values are important, but we don't give the simple and actionable steps that we can bring that value to life. And we love helping our partners with that. And next, we can simplify accountability and follow through. What does that mean? Get back to the definition. Get back to the definition of accountability and start to align our shared understanding as a team. Let's start with our team. Hey, what do we want for accountability? How do we create an environment where we will be open and safe to trust that everything's going to be okay when we share when we're on track and when we're not on track? How can we align? How can we close the intent impact gap? Use the why equation. So you've got the recording, right? We've got the 2 steps. We can make it even simpler than that. We can ask ourselves those 2 parts. Are our team members, or is the team, do they know what's the point of this task or this objective or this project? And do they know why they're expected to do it in this way, right? If the answer is yes, or maybe or no, we've got to get back to this. And finally, the last strategy that we have is one of my favorites. It's an accountability checklist. Now, you might be wondering, what is an accountability checklist? Well, we've got one in the question section. You're going to have an opportunity to download the accountability checklist that the Brivia team put together. But what is on this checklist? Let's see what's on this checklist. Well, this checklist was developed after traveling the world and talking about this conundrum of accountability. How can we get closer to bridging the intent impact gap? Well, a checklist helps us that if we've given someone a task or we've given a team something to do and we're thinking about accountability, that we want people to be willing to take ownership and celebrate when they're on track and also when they're not, we have to ask ourselves this. And in the checklist, you can follow it. It's like a yes or no box. So just before we think about accountability, we have to ask, is or are they clear on the intent and purpose of the task? Yes, maybe, maybe no, yes, okay. Hopefully it's yes, move on. Understands the needs and values driving the objective. Do they understand this? Do they know with certainty the role and expectations of themselves on this task in the project? Are they clear on the specific targets, what we're measuring, how we're measuring them, and the deliverables? Yes? Maybe? No? Can they identify with certainty the required timeline? Right? Do they have the required tools and resources for the task? Now, I'm going to pause there because for decades, that's the one area that we've got to throw in my favorite 4 words, to the extent possible. I think many of us have been operating with not always the perfect amount of resources or tools, right? So to the extent possible. And does the individual or team understand the structure and process for 2-way communication? Do we have a communication pathway for when we're doing well and when we're not doing well, giving feedback, development, evaluative, right? If we don't have that in place, it's hard to hold people accountable. And finally, did we provide support, appreciation, and recognition? I hear voice of my day, lots of people, well, why should I thank them, Steve? It's their job. Research shows that they'll probably do it better, right? And 100 other reasons, right? Feels good, right? So how do we use this checklist? I use this checklist often. And if I have maybes and no's on the checklist, I can't really go and hold people accountable until I rectify this. Well, I can. There's one person I can hold responsible. Now, it's not even about holding responsible, right? Well, it is when it comes to me, right? I don't hold others responsible. I create conditions where they're willing to take responsibility. For me, I hold myself to this checklist. And if the answers to the checklist are maybe or no, I've got to look in the mirror and hold that person accountable. So that checklist you're going to be able to have access to. We're going to send it to you in the follow-up as well. But accountability, it's up to everyone. And we're going to open it up to questions right away. I want to hear your questions. Put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A. Chris, I'm going to kick it to you in about 30 seconds. The good news is accountability is up to all of us, right? We can enhance the experience of accountability so that we all celebrate it. We anticipate it. We uphold it. Right? And most importantly, we run to it excited. We run to accountability excited, not run away from it. The word and the experience of accountability should be something that makes us shine, not shiver or shake, right? Accountability, it shouldn't hurt. And if you'd like to know more about how you and your leaders can bring important values to life in a manner that strengthens culture of accountability and all the great things that come with it, give us a call, right? Because our promise is to make work and life better. And at Brivia, we love to help. And speaking of helping, I can't wait to hear comments or questions. I'm going to pass it over to Chris. And yeah, thanks again for being here. Chris, over to you.
Awesome, Steve. Thank you. And insightful as always. And as usual, there are a number of questions, but I still encourage people to put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A. We'll get through as many as we can here. Actually, first, I'm going to start, Steve, by sharing a reflection that someone shared with us here. I'll just share it with you just to get your thoughts. And the reflection is this: maybe accountability is a willingness to accept a sort of personal or professional vulnerability, which can be scary. Professionalism doesn't mean perfectionism. We're all human.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what a great reflection. Could you read that again, Chris? Because there's a part I'd love to comment on.
Maybe accountability is a willingness to accept a sort of professional vulnerability.
Right. Professional vulnerability. Yeah, I think anytime that we have, especially if you have, values and high expectations of great things, we all feel that sting I talked about, right? And to acknowledge, especially in the Western world, that we're wrong or that we're off or that we might have screwed up is a vulnerability for sure. And it always will be, right? It's just, can we create conditions where it's okay to be vulnerable, where it's okay to say, hey, I didn't do as well as I thought I would, or as well as we agreed to. So I think it's a great reflection.
Yes, absolutely agreed, Steve. I just wanted to start with that. But here's a good question for you that came in early. How do you hold someone accountable in a supportive way when they refuse to do their job?
Wow, that's packed. I mean, unless somebody says, I refuse to do my job, I think we have to be cautious that it appears that they are reluctant or apprehensive to get the job done in the way that, right? So again, it comes back. We have when something goes wrong, we don't ask what's wrong, we ask what's going on. And when a behavior is incongruent with what we've agreed to, we have to go back and just re-clarify, had we been clear, right? And are they feeling connected? Because one of the reasons why we come back down to that, and not to minimize how difficult that example is, but often when we go back, we find that in many cases, people aren't as clear as we thought they were, including me. I've sent people away and they didn't get it done. And I found out later that I left some things out unintentionally, right? Or they were getting mixed messages. And the other one was, do they feel connected to what I'm asking them? Do they see the value in it, right? Do they understand why they're expected to get it done? That's just the starting point. And I said, once we clear that out, we reset and renegotiate the expectations and go through the accountability checklist. And if it's still happening, we have to be honest about, let's have a conversation, right? Let's have a conversation. I'm a bit confused, right? I think this is what we had talked about, what we agreed upon, and this is what I'm seeing. Can you help me? Can you help me understand, what I'm missing here, right? So that's my suggestion. And just to say, in the next webinar, Chris Downey, great friend and colleague, is speaking about this exact issue in the next webinar on performance. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know if it was or wasn't in the chat. Chris, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Setting the bar high there for next month. Here's a question, and clearly someone was paying attention during the webinar. How do we know if the bindings are secure?
Ooh, good one. Great question. Great metaphor. I mean, I'd love to talk about the snowboarding and skiing. We ask, right? We perception check. One of the things I used to do is I send people off because we were rushed, but I thought, got to save a little bit of time. I don't know. What do we do when we tie skates for kids, right? Or for our partners, right? When we help with skis, we ask them, is that snug enough? Right? So I think, so we don't know how tight or loose that is, only they know. And that's one of the things we promote at Brivia, constantly checking in with the experience of our people. Are you clear as you can be on this, and through the checklist or through the why equation, right? Do you understand what's expected of you? And we have to be prepared if some of them say, no, I don't see the value in this. It's not tied to the vision. We don't have any vision. We have to be okay that the binding isn't as tight as it could be, right? So what can we do, again, to the extent possible, to ensure that we understand that their experiences are conveyed to us, that they have what they need to go? Because I don't know why we would send anyone, a child, a team member, if we're at the top of the hill and they say, no, the bindings aren't tight, and we'd say, well, go down anyway, we got no time. Right? So we got to do what we can to the extent possible before we send them out there to ensure that their bindings are tight, that they got the clarity and the connection to the extent possible that they need to get this done.
Excellent. Thank you,
All right.
Steve. And the big takeaway there I heard from you is ask. You know, are they? I tied my daughter's skates the other day and asked the question, are they snug enough? And that's or too snug for that matter. That is a good way of looking at it. There's a question in the chat, Steve, that you'd probably see. I'll just read it off to you here. I think it's Susanna's agreeing with everything that you had to say, Steve, and they, in all caps, said their biggest challenge in nurturing accountability from the middle management position is how to do upward management. Who holds the power over processes and impacts my ability to effectively plant a seed for accountability as a shared value? So when you're in, I guess I'm just interpreting the question. You're in the middle. How do you hold accountability up? How do you manage up in this regard?
Yeah, one of the toughest things in any industry is to manage up and influence people that legally and ethically on no contract does it say we're responsible for. But that doesn't mean that we don't do it. We're trying to do it. So it's a great question. Coming back to values, right? And connection and clarity. If we don't have guiding values, right, then we have no bindings. If we don't have an objective or a set of priorities for this task, we don't have that. So it's important to make sure those are in place before we try to hold middle and senior leaders responsible. If they're not there, we got to start having conversations, right? What's guiding our work? What's important to them? And you can ask your leaders this. You don't have to have a formal meeting. You can do it over coffee in any way. If there are things in place, like we call it the compass, vision, mission, values, and strategy, let's just have a conversation about, can you help me understand how what you're asking me to do or how our team lines up with the mission or the strategy? That's the clarity. Right? How does it line up with the vision and the values and the specific values of efficiency and excellence and integrity and whatever it is you have guiding you? It really is about having a conversation. This is for some of the senior leaders that are here. I know some of them are here. This is important why to get the compass right or as close to right as possible. Because the compass, the vision, mission, values, and then you go down into the department, maybe the department charter, vision, mission, values, strategy, or even on the team or the project. If those things aren't in place, we don't have the footing. We don't have the footing to hold people accountable in the way that we want to. And when we remove the footing, it gets slippery. And when it gets slippery, it moves from a professional interaction to a personal interaction, right? So if somebody, you know, and I know I might be babbling, I hope this is helpful, but if somebody asks, what's the point of this and why in this way? And I say, well, that's because that's just the way we do things around here. You know, you're on a need to know basis. This is not accountability. This is not setting them up for success. But if we can say, well, the reason why we're doing this is because it's in line with the efficient value and excellence value. We're trying to balance our customer satisfaction with the new project model, right? If I'm still confused by this, then they're going to add some other things to clarify what's the point and why in this way. And if I leave confused, we've got to ask what's going on. Okay, what's going on here that is leading to the confusion. Okay, great. So that's my I hope that was helpful. That was a lot.
Yeah, Steve. No, for sure. There's lots of questions coming in. We have a few minutes. I want to get to them. And there's one that actually that's going to springboard off of this, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I want to just ask you this question, and it's more of a can you comment on accountability at leadership level, creating a culture within the workplace? So this is the question: does that create disrespect towards leaders when they show accountability, or would that enhance the culture in the workplace? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, great question. And again, I think it's, and Chris, you can jump in to answer some of this stuff too, because you're so absolutely brilliant. I think it's never that we do or what we do in the process of any insert value, integrity, accountability. We're talking about accountability. It's how do we do it? How do we have conversations, right? And this comes back down to the values and a shared language. How do we have conversations about what's important to us at our organization? Right. And I think just asking, you know, if you're afraid to ask your leader, right, or any other leader in the organization, it probably speaks to the culture, right? So, you know, it could speak to the culture, and Chris, you can jump in on that. But I think it's about engendering conversations about what's important to us. How can we work better together? What does success look like for us? How are we going to get there, right? How can we have a conversation when we're on or when we're off? right? And I think that's the starting point, right? I don't want to get into if you experience, but I think that's it. Can we have a conversation about what is the culture? We talk about the culture that we want versus the culture that we got, right? How do we create a culture that we want, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think, Steve, to answer that question very directly is, I believe leaders showing accountability would actually show strength in leadership, and would lead to higher levels of respect in leadership versus disrespect, and it would certainly enhance the culture. So there's a great question. So thanks for asking that. And on that note, Steve, and I was going to say there was a deeper question, but I heard a response from the individual that you've answered it in your previous question, which is great. So thank you for that. So you're answering multiples here, which is great.
All right.
And maybe this is the one for us to close on. How do you get a leader to understand that accountability is not a way to check things off their list? So it's not used to be as a form of offloading. How do you get a leader to really understand?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? Again, it's one of those things at Brivio, we talk about these. It seems so simple, but doing it is profound and sometimes hard. But coming back to the definition of accountability, right? We gotta try to move away from, because it's important to get things done. It's important to check things off the list. Like that's how we move, and that's how we approximate and accommodate important goals. Accountability is, what environment do we create where people can acknowledge and take an obligation to own what they're supposed to own, right? So the checklist is probably that leader's part of their accountability. They may be depending on other people to get this done. So how do we work better together in a way so that we can celebrate when we're on track and be open to say, hey, we're off track? And it's really about creating those conditions where willingness comes forward, where we're okay to say, hey, we just didn't do what we agreed to do. How do we get back on track? So again, I think it's shifting. The list is important, the checklist, the tasks and objectives. We've got to be careful that that's just because we hit them doesn't mean that means we're being successful. That's not necessarily accountability. Accountability is along the way, have we created the conditions where people can say we're on track and or we're off track. Okay, and that's my answer for now. I hope that was helpful. Such great questions.
So Steve,
thank you.
On that note, I'll get you to advance the slide just so people could access the checklist.
Yes, geez,
and
yes.
Maybe
yes.
this is something in closing for you to share, because this is actually a question, I think it lines up with that question. What is the purpose of accountability? I think you were getting to it in that answer there. That maybe we can close on that as the final question that came in. What is the purpose of accountability?
Yeah, it really is. The whole purpose of accountability is about feeling a sense of safety, a sense of accuracy, a sense of integrity, a sense, and more importantly, you hear all these other values word, it's about ownership, right? And this is the important thing about ownership, is that when we create ownership, okay, this is going to go hashtag deep into my research on the algorithm. The reason why, if ownership is important and we know who owns what, we create a sense of predictability. We create a sense of consistency. Right, and when we create a sense of consistency, clarity, and predictability, we enhance the connection and the trust. Right, if you think about what happens when we don't know who owns what, right? It creates an uncertainty, it creates confusion, frustration, stress, and anxiety. When we know that people are going to own what we've agreed to own, it elevates the level of connection and clarity, strengthens trust, and really exponentially gets us closer to success. So that's the answer I have for today. It's probably a bit deeper than that and more, but what a great question. And I'm going to pass it back to Chris. I know the QR code is here for you to access the accountability checklist. I know in the follow-up, we'll also let you know where you can get that as well. So Chris, back over to you. And thank you everybody for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you all for joining us. As Steve mentioned, you could access the QR code, or you could access the checklist by using the QR code. It's also the link is also in the chat, and there is a question in the chat. Is this checklist a good idea to use with staff members to make sure that we're on the same page? Absolutely. Use this with your staff to make sure people are on the same page. We are going to send a follow-up to you all. We'll make sure the link is even in the follow-up, so you have multiple avenues to receive the checklist. We'll also send you a copy of the recording for you to listen to and to share with your friends and with your colleagues, and also information on how to sign up for our next webinar. Thank you again for taking time to be here with you all, and we look forward to seeing you at future sessions. And keep in touch with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Send us your questions and anything you'd like to hear more about. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.